Ramona went to Washington, D.C. with her 8th grade class. One of their stops was at the Crime and Punishment Museum. They were in the interactive section, which was a mock-up of a crime scene. Being a fan of murder mysteries, Ramona, along with her 2 friends, were trying to solve the fake murder when one of her friends began looking around the bed. She mentioned that the dummy on the bed looked very realistic when it suddenly grabbed her. Ramona tried to get him off of her, but he pulled her friend to his arms and mumbled, "No, that's my teddy bear." Ramona decided to play along, so she said in a motherly voice,
"Come on, sweetheart. You're going to miss the bus."
The man was so drunk that he fell for it, and he dropped her friend and ran out of the museum shouting.
If you play guitar, there's a few pieces of advice you always hear. Stop playing if you're getting blisters, keep your back straight, don't hold the pick too tightly. But I'll always remember the day my teacher said, stop playing if you're starting to bleed. I mean, obviously. Who the hell is still playing the guitar while their fingers are bleeding and going, oh, maybe just 7 or 8 more hours of practice then? Who needs that advice?
One night, Hellbent and his family were playing an intense game of Monopoly. The game had gone on for hours and everyone was on edge, wanting to win. Hellbent's turn came and he picked up the dreaded go directly to jail card. Without thinking, he screamed,
"Fuck!"
forgetting that he was in front of his ultra-conservative parents. As punishment, Hellbent's parents sent him to the basement for a few hours. What's worse is that they made him spend those hours kneeling on uncooked grains of rice. Geez, Hellbent's parents have issues.
Dolan was 12. He went to his friend's house because they wanted to work on comics. They went to his room, but his friend's brother heard them and came to the room wearing only his underwear. He just stood there and stared at them for an awkward 10 seconds or so, and then he turned around and started twerking. As he was bouncing, he looked at Dolan and said, "You know you want it." Dolan never went to his friend's house again.
When Mimi was 12 years old, her parents were throwing a baby shower for a friend. Mimi sat in the corner uninterested in the conversation until a middle-aged man walked over and sat next to her. She had no idea who this guy was, so after a few minutes she decided to say hello. He looked at her for 3 seconds and then whispered, "Your hair smells nice." Unsurprisingly, she stood up, left the room, and spent the rest of the night avoiding the party.
When Gergak was 12, he had this dog who was not exactly the brightest pooch around. One day, Gergak's mom called him downstairs because the dog had eaten a whole bunch of dental floss. Gergak's mom told him to reach in and pull it out, but Gergak was like, "No way, man, that's gross." His mom then sweetened the deal by offering him $50. Gergak agreed and dove right in. He has never been the same since. I love digging my hand in my dog's butthole.
One time, Ladybot was sleeping over at her friend Robo's house. In the middle of the night, she had to go to the bathroom. Robo's bathroom wasn't available because her older brother was using it, so she told Ladybot to use the one in her mother's bedroom because she wasn't home. When Ladybot walked into the bathroom, she noticed a dildo stuck to the mirror. Then, as she washed her hands, she saw a cup filled with condoms next to the sink. Needless to say, Ladybot thought it was weird seeing a dildo stuck to the mirror.
Throughout his school life, there was this one girl who Sweet Commando really liked. They were good friends, and naively, he honestly thought they were in love. One day, out on the playground, he said to her,
"Hey, guess what?
then yelled at the top of his voice,
I'm going to marry you!"
It was awkward for everyone involved when she didn't really share his enthusiasm. They remained just friends for a few years afterwards until she left school one day and never came back.
Doopy went out to dinner for a first date. After dinner, they chilled at his house and cuddled. Eventually, the guy asked, "How kinky are you?" And Doopy said, "Very." So the guy told her to shut her eyes and don't be scared of what he's about to do. He leaves and comes back with handcuffs. Doopy, now handcuffed to the bed, was getting excited until the guy said, "I just want to keep you here alone in this room tonight and have sex with my bitch right next to you." He did exactly that and then told Doopy that she could go home after they were done.
One time, Slaptam and his brother were in the same class together. Not only are they brothers, but they have the same birthmark and can talk German. One day, they had a substitute teacher, and when he saw them, he immediately called them Dipshit 1 and Dipshit 2. They were only in the 5th grade at the time, and the teacher eventually got fired and was not allowed to step foot on the property. 1 year later, Slapped Ham found him working at a fryer's store at the counter. Spinal Palm's first job was at a fast food restaurant. One day they were really busy, so the manager put Spinal Palm on drive-through duty without any training. A couple came through and placed an order. The guy was young and fit, but the woman was a bit overweight. Because it was busy, the couple had to wait over 20 minutes for their food. Eventually the man got impatient, came to the window to ask for a cup of water. Spinal Palm glanced over at the guy's overweight wife and said,
Do you want water for your pregnant wife?
Of course, the man's wife was not pregnant. He got so mad that he ended up yelling at Spinal Palm's manager for 15 minutes. The manager was furious, and Spinal Palm still feels bad to this day for insulting a stranger's wife. Ursa has a sister who is 12, 2 years younger than her. One day, Ursa's sister kept on pestering her about why Ursa was older than her. She answered with, "Because I was born 2 years before you?" Her sister began screaming and yelling and threw their mother's favorite plate at her head. When their mum asked why Ursa's sister was so angry, her reason was because she was being mean, and she I thought she was a spider. Ursa's sister was grounded for 2 months, and Ursa needed 3 stitches with a plate hit her.
When Melissa was younger, she loved going jet skiing with her dad. What she didn't like was waiting for her turn at the shoreline and watching her younger siblings. One day while waiting, Melissa paddled out too far into the water and lost track of her siblings. She tried to find her way back but fell down a sudden drop in the lake. Melissa bobbed in treaded water for what felt like hours, but she was too far for her family to see her. Melissa was gasping for air and thought she was going to die. After a long while, a neighbor spotted her and pulled her from the water. She now prefers the land or the sky, anywhere but the water.
When Pandora moved to a new house once, the first thing she noticed was a pitch-black figure hiding up a tree. It stared at her with blood-red eyes. Whenever she would run to a different room, it would follow her, circling the house. Weird things started happening every night. One morning, she woke up with all of the kitchen chairs around her bed in a circle. The next night, she slept in her brother's bunk bed. During the night, the metal ladder on the bed somehow detached and smashed loudly onto the ground. As scared as she was, her parents refused to move house because they thought she was making it all up.
Andy and her family were driving home from a game store. While at a red light, they saw something that wouldn't look out of place in the latest Grand Theft Auto. A guy in his late 40s was having a boxing match with a payphone. He was circling it, shouting nonsense at it, and was clearly just wasted. Andy's dad drove before they could see how it ended, and Andy wants to know if the man defeated his formidable opponent, the payphone.
What's the weirdest rule my school ever had? It's a rule that everybody has to deal with, the zero tolerance policy. What exactly is a zero tolerance policy? It's a rule that means no matter what the circumstance, if you break a rule, whether to save a life, protect your own, or do the right thing, you are still in violation and you will be punished. So let's say somebody's punching you in the face over and over and over and over again. If you strike back, you're also fighting, and you'll both be equally punished. You think that's bad? Imagine you see somebody choking and gasping for air, but you have your inhaler on you, so you run up to them and you administer that inhaler, they're breathing again, you just saved a life! And you also just administered a drug to another student on campus, so I'm afraid you have to be expelled. It wasn't all bad though. We found out the rule went both ways for administration and students. And the administration didn't always get along either. So, let's say you see Coach Rimmer out in the parking lot smoking a cigarette. Tell the reading teacher, she hates that guy. She'll run out in the parking lot, get him in trouble, and a good time will be had by all. Well, except for Coach Rimmer. Not that much more to say outside of the fact that everybody hated that rule. Faculty, students, except for some of the people at the top of administration. They loved the rule because it meant they didn't have to think anymore.
When Dolan was in the 4th grade, he and his buddies liked to turn their calculators upside down and write awesome words like seal boob. They joked about how this was hacking their calculators. Unfortunately, Dolan's cranky teacher, Miss Chupoy, who everyone called Miss Chutoy, didn't find this funny. When she found out what they were doing, she sent everyone who touched a calculator to the office. She thought they'd actually hack their calculators. I think someone hacked her brain.
One time when she was younger, Ladybot decided to feed the birds. She grabbed some cereal and opened the window, then proceeded to throw handfuls of cereal outside. When her mum found out what she was doing, she made Ladybot go outside and clean it up from the planter strip where it had landed. As a punishment for wasting the cereal, she had to use that cereal for breakfast, dirt and all.
When he was in college, there was a girl that Hellbent was head over heels for, but couldn't bring himself to ask her out. He finally worked up the courage to ask her out, but she gave him a soft and honest no. But he wasn't about to give up. He decided to lay a trail of rose petals from her dorm to his, but before that he lit a bunch of candles in his dorm and put a condom on his bed. So he started the trail, and it was hard work. When he was on the last 100 feet, Hellbent was going straight for 19 hours, but an eagle-eyed teacher noticed and asked him what he was doing. Hellbent explained, and she understood and simply walked off. After that, he was done and rang her doorbell and then ran back to his dorm. 10 minutes later, the girl opened the door to his dorm, and, well, they had a good time.
One time, Dolan was visiting Detroit and had to ride the subway. The train was super crowded, so Dolan grabbed onto a pole and just listened to the people around him chatting. Eventually, Dolan noticed a group of really sketchy guys with deep voices. They were standing behind him whispering about their plans to murder a rival drug lord. Eventually, one of them looked up and noticed Dolan watching them. They realized he had been eavesdropping and started moving towards him. Dolan freaked out and jumped off the train at the very next stop. Last year, at an anime convention, James Shark saw a man sprint through the entrance and start yelling, "He is coming! The Grand Sensei is coming! And you all will be punished!" James Shark thought it might have just been an excited con attendee, but just then the security tackled him to the ground and escorted him out.
One day, McKylum was sleeping on the front row of the bus while on the way to work. He woke up a few blocks before his stop and saw 3 suspicious guys waiting to go on board. He sensed something was about to happen and decided to go to the back of the bus just in front of the back door. A few seconds after the driver accelerated again, the 3 guys started shouting at people to give them their wallets. McKylum decided to jump out of the bus, but it was moving and he saw the hand of one of the guys trying to stop him, but he jumped so quick that the man only grabbed his headphones cable. McKylum started running to try to avoid falling, but the bus was going too fast for him to do that, so he ended up slipping on the asphalt. Luckily, it had rained the night before, so he only injured his knee and hand. He continued his day normally, but got to his job covered in blood.
The dumbest excuse Snoopy ever heard was when she was 13. Her brother stole $5 from her and lied about it. His alibi was that he couldn't have stolen the money because he was painting a picture. He even gave Snoopy the picture to prove it. Aside from the obvious ones, there were a couple of huge problems with this excuse. The first was that Snoopy's brother was allergic to an ingredient in paint. The second problem? The picture he had submitted as proof that he was painting was just a computer-printed copy of the Mona Lisa.
Every day, Tolop gets asked the same question all employees hate. Excuse me, do you work here? He'll be wearing a name tag, a uniform with the company logo on it, putting stock on shelves, sweeping the floor, and someone will still come up and ask him. One day he decided that stupid questions need stupid answers, so he said,
No, ma'am. I just like to dress up as an employee when I go shopping.
He then pointed at his co-worker and said,
But I think that guy over there, he'll be able to help you.
The insane part is the customer actually believed this.
When Nixium was 10 years old, he shared a laptop with his brother. One day, he excitedly grabbed the laptop off his brother to show his mom something really interesting. His face froze at what came on the screen. Porn. Hardcore porn. His mom and dad looked at him with disgusted shock, while he tried to tell them it wasn't him who was watching it. They didn't believe him, and needless to say, he was banned from using the laptop for a month.
One day, Dolan invited Sidious over for Sidious's first ever LAN party. Sidious was nervous about being around so many hardcore gamers, so he came up with a joke to break the ice. As he walked in, he shouted,
"Hey guys, who knows what Mario's overalls are made from?"
And no one responded. Sidious raised his voice even louder and shouted,
"Denim, denim, denim."
The joke wasn't just bad, but it had drawn everyone's attention from their intense game of StarCraft. So, it was annoying, in addition to not funny. It took a while before Sid recovered from that embarrassing first impression.
My most annoying habit that drives people nuts is that I stare at them. When they're eating food, I stare at them. When they're writing down notes to their paper, I stare at them. When they're looking at their computer, I stare at them. When they think they have some privacy, I'm there, staring at them. I'm always staring at the people, no matter who it is, mom, dad, family, friends, enemies. I always stare down anybody. And when they stare back at me, I stare at them harder. I always make sure that people know I'm always staring at you. I'm always staring at everyone, no matter what. Luckily, I've never gotten my teeth punched in for this habit that I have. But usually people are pretty comforting and they ask me what's going on, and I just say I have a pretty big issue with staring at people.
When Honeybits and her sister stayed at their brother's house one time, they heard a whirring noise in the middle of the night. Honeybits knew that it was only the freezer, but her sister got scared. So she told her sister that it was a sound Cabbage made at night. Their brother happened to have some cabbage in the fridge, so her sister went to check it out. Despite being in middle school and having enough common sense not to believe that kind of lie, her sister still believed it. She believed it for many years, up until she was in high school. Honeybits overheard her sister telling her friends about that fact one day. That was when she decided to tell her the truth, to save her from any further humiliation.
Doopy has actually experienced sleep paralysis and thinks it is the most disturbing thing she has ever been through. She was 15 the first time it happened, when she was stuck to her bed, staring upwards. There was a dark purple mass on the ceiling, made up of faces and arms. The arms were reaching out to grab her, but the faces were the worst. The faces were screaming in agony, as if they were being tortured. Their screams were very distorted. What's worse is the dream faded out of memory until about 3 months ago when it happened again. The exact same hallucination. But by then, Doopy knew a lot more about sleep paralysis, so it never disturbed her as much. But that doesn't negate how much of a negative effect the first time had on her when she was 15. To this day, Doopy can never shake the feeling she gets sometimes, as if that shadowy mass wasn't just her brain being a scumbag, because after all, it could be something haunting her, trying to add her to its mass. Gooby's family was at a Mexican restaurant for her grandfather's birthday. There, they had a live mariachi band that would play music for the guests. So Gooby's mom had the idea to ask them to play Happy Birthday in Spanish. After they ordered their food, Gooby went to the band and asked them to play Happy Birthday, and they said they would do it for free. So the band went to the table with Gooby's family and started singing, with everybody singing along. In the middle of the song, out of nowhere, Gooby's grandfather yelled, "I don't speak Chinese!" Everyone in the restaurant went quiet. A long, uncomfortable silence gave way to a quiet, uncomfortable laugh. Gooby's entire family was bright red in the face. They didn't go to that restaurant much after that. Too embarrassing.
Doopy had hurt her knee at a trampoline park when she was 15 years old. It was at the beginning of sophomore year and she was limping on crutches. At the end of the day, she was walking down a long hall from the choir room. It had rained outside, so the floor was a little slippery and her crutches slipped out from under her. She fell on the floor with her heavy backpack on and couldn't stand up. 5 or 6 people walked on by and just stared at her. Finally, one of the teachers saw her sitting on the floor, struggling to stand up, and ended up helping her back to safety.
One time when I was a young kid, I had a crush on a certain girl who I talked to often. One day, I decided to man up and to give her a proper compliment on how beautiful and sweet she was. I said to her, "You, babe, you're as sweet as a chocolate log." Completely out of the blue. Right after saying it, I realized that I had literally and accidentally just said to her that she was as sweet as feces, but I guess she didn't realize what chocolate log was slang for because she just smiled and said thanks. I chuckled lightly, and we never dated. Turns out she didn't like me. Oh. Andy Mations was in her bed, staring at the door, just about to fall asleep, but a tall blue skeletal figure in tattered clothes slid through the doorway. She looked at it and buried her head in the covers in fear. When she looked back, it was still there, but closer. On instinct, Andy Mations covered her head again. When she removed the blanket, it wasn't near Andy Mations' bed. It was on it. Its dead eyes stared deep into her soul, and from the distance, she saw every detail on its face. The main thing was that it actually was a skeleton with ripped clothing and chains around its wrists that floated about. Andy Mations flinched, closing her eyes. She told herself that everything was over. And when she opened her eyes, it was gone. Andy Mations could only assume that it was over. No more paranormal experiences. But unfortunately, they still happen to this day. Ghost Toast was talking with a few friends at an anime convention while dressed as Dragon Ball Z characters. He noticed a guy who kept giving him weird looks from across the room. The man just looked like a regular dude, not dressed up or anything. Ghost Toast was mid-conversation when he demonstrated a Kamehameha wave with his hands, and just then, the dude from across the room started freaking out. He ran up to Ghost Toast and said, "The gesture you just made with your hands is a sign of Satan, and if you don't cut it out, he will come here, and he will eat you alive." Then he started flailing his arms in the air, and he ran out the door. Ghost Toast never saw him again, but to this day, he wonders how that move could have possibly have woken up Satan himself.
One day in 6th grade, when Gergak was waiting for school to start, he was sitting on a bench checking his phone, minding his own business. Suddenly, a 7th grader appears out of nowhere and asks Gergak, "Are you gay?" He was startled by the person and the question and said, "No." The guy squinted and asked Gergak, "Can I almond in your ear?" Gergak looked at him, completely confused by the nonsense question. "No." The guy then stood up and yelled, "You will be mine!" Before walking away, Gergak never saw him again.
Gergak is not sure how it started, but his family had a very odd tradition. Whenever he visits his grandmother's house, they have dinner like any normal family. But during the meal, his grandma insists that everyone has to tell a story about pooping. Gergak's mom will roll her eyes and say they need to stop this stupid tradition, but his grandma will just yell back, "Every person will tell a goddamn poop story, and that's final." Gergak and his brothers were so used to it that they always came prepared to tell some sort of poo joke or whatever while they eat their meals. It's kind of weird.
When Sidious was younger, he was playing hide and seek at his friend Spinal Palm's house. It was his turn to hide, so he ran around the house looking for the perfect spot. Spinal Palm was counting down really quickly, and Sidious panicked, so he ran into the nearest room and locked the door behind him. It was only when he heard a loud shriek when he realized where he was. He had accidentally walked in on Spinal Palm's sister, who was getting changed in her room. He screamed back and quickly ran out of the room. He still can't look her in the eyes.
I have a vague memory of being out one night. We'd gone to a nightclub and was coming home. I sometimes get a bit excitable and do things away from my group of friends. So on this night, I ran off. I disappeared for a little while, and I had one of those moments where you lose your memory. So all I really know about this is that I came back to the group after some time, probably 10 or 15 minutes, and I had a big tear all under my shirt and I was bleeding. To this day, I do not know what I did. I probably tried to climb something, but it really could have been anything. Did I try to steal a car and get dragged behind it for a while? Did I get knocked over by a bull? I will just never know.
Pandora has a condition called, trichotillomania. Trichotillomania, or something like that. This means that when she gets nervous, she will pull out her own hair from out of her head. Sometimes she just takes a single strand, but if she's really stressed out, she will rip out entire clumps of her hair. This habit started when Pandora was getting bullied. It got so bad that she had a big bald spot on her head. Her teachers gave her special permission to wear hats at school to stop her from pulling out her hair. Pandora seems to be getting better though. She now has a full head of hair, but she has to stop herself from going back to her old hair-pulling ways whenever she gets anxious.
When Tolop was 5, he had a mean babysitter. One day, he was sitting on the sofa when she threw an egg at his head and complained that he left the fridge open, even though she was the one that had left it open. Then, when he went to the pool, she pushed him in and jumped on top of him. While Tolop was drowning, she scratched his back and started cussing at him. When his mom got home, the babysitter slapped her across the face, then left. Still, Tulip got grounded for a month. The next day, she robbed their house, then took his Game Boy and smashed it right in front of him. Tulip was so mad that he said, "Get out of my house!" He cried himself to sleep that night. When he turned 17, she framed him for theft because she had her shoes stolen and accused him of doing it. He went to jail for a day. Everyone thinks she's innocent.